Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
2 weeks ago, we read a verse and then left a cliffhanger because Rashi has a lot to say on this verse. And then you had an interlude back in the book of Rashi. So we're in chapter 12 of the book of Shemot, book of Exodus. And we read verse 15, but didn't do any of the Rashis on it. So let's read the verse again to get us going, and then we'll look at the Rashis. So chapter 12, verse 15 of Shemot. I'll read the verse to get us going. 1 second, someone's joining. Okay. We're in the chapter that both describes Exodus night and begins to extrapolate from Exodus night into our ongoing obligation. Shivat Yamim, 7 days, matzot tochelu, eat matzahs. Ach means kind of like a but or pay attention or an intensifier. Bayom harishon, on the first day, tashbitu seor, eradicate leaven mi batechem. We saw how Uncle translates seor as chamir, as one of the two words we say in the biur chametz formula. Kol chamira v'chamia. The chamia is chametz because the ayin in Aramaic is a tzadi in Hebrew, and chamir is leaven, maybe the leavening agent. Eradicate it from your homes. Ki, because kol ochel chametz, anyone who eats chametz, v'nichrata hanefesh, that person, that we might translate it today using soul, but remember, biblically, nefesh really means actually not the spirit, the person, him or herself. Yisrael will be cut off from Israel. Miyom harishon ad yom hashvi, and then kind of a parenthetical clause. This is in place from the first day until the seventh day. Okay, we spent a lot of time looking at that verse, and I don't want to kind of go back and relitigate everything, but I wanted to get it out there so we can understand what Rashi is going to be commenting on. Barry, did you want to add something? You need to wait for a microphone.
So you're not supposed to eat it, but it doesn't say why do you have to remove it? Why doesn't it just say you shall not eat it? What's the removing have to do with eating? Temptation. No, I'm.
Doesn't say. You're right. It tells you can't eat it, and it tells you have to remove it. So it's making it clear already in this verse that there are many obligations and restrictions regarding chametz and Pesach. One is consumption, and one is even having it around.
But it specifies not eating. It doesn't specify.
It doesn't specify what.
Anyone who eats it will be cut off.
Right.
So why do you have to remove it? Also, you just don't eat it.
Because they're adding a prohibition, right? I mean, that's why to this day our relationship to chametz and Pesach is not just whether or not it goes down our gullets, but whether or not we're exposed to it. In fact, I had on Pesach, I had a moment which violates on some level this verse. So you know that mechirat chametz, the sale of chametz, is really not supposed to cover your Cheerios. It's supposed to cover the stuff you couldn't find, or things of significant financial value. And mostly, at least in the modern era, that's whiskey, right? That you do not have to, thank God, empty out your entire whiskey cabinet for Pesach. What's that? At once. You'd have quite a party, yes. So I collect very few things. One of the things that I collect is whiskeys from around the country and the world. And so I have quite a collection. So I don't have to get rid of them. I put them in my cabinets, and I close up the cabinets so you can't access them, and I drape things over it. And there was one box that didn't fit anywhere else. So I decided to put it in Noah's room in her closet because she doesn't live in Los Angeles anymore. And so it's as if it's away. But Javi reminded me that she was coming home for Pesach mid-Pesach. And she would not want to open her closet door and see a box of whiskey. So I had to go into her room on Pesach and look I always wanted to like carry it like this, right? Because you're supposed to eradicate it from your home so that you're not even seeing it. Bal ye ra'ev, bal ye matzeh. You're supposed to neither see it nor find it. Okay, so that's where the verse brings us. There are lots of questions on the verse. Rather than going back through the questions, although I do see some hands up, I want to, as quickly as possible, get to Rashi, because Rashi is going to deal with the questions and problems in the verse. But Diane and Larry, go ahead. How can I say no?
Sorry, didn't mean to prolong the discussion. I actually 2 points. I think Barry's got a good point here.
Larry, hold on 1 second. Can you speak louder, and can someone adjust the outbound volume over there? The sound is in our room is very hard for you to hear, for us to hear.
So my two.
It's on the speaker grid, so.
Go ahead, Larry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So 2 points I'll make briefly. One is I think Barry has a good point, and I would restate it slightly differently, which is we know that there are several prohibitions on eating, on possessing, on benefiting, but according to this verse, the only one for which you are cut off is eating. So if you kept the chametz in your house, you just didn't eat it, you wouldn't be cut off, perhaps.
Right, and halachically that is the case, right? That to the extent in which we trust the halachic system and the reward and punishments inherent in the observance or the lack thereof of mitzvot, yes, karet is a punishment for consuming chametz. It is not a punishment for having accidentally seen it. Correct? Okay.
Second point is, I always thought that one of the reasons for selling, besides preserving our whiskey stocks, was it was like the annulling by selling just in case we accidentally had something that was still in our possession. We've sold it, so we've protected ourselves from even the possession.
Correct. That's correct. It's a fence around the rule, right? We do everything we possibly can to make sure that we're not in possession of. So physically, financially, the sale, and then conceptually, the nullification. So there are 3 levels, at least three nets to prevent us from falling into the abyss of chametz on Pesach. Rick.
Hi. Now that we're looking at the sentence again, I had a question about what does it mean to be cut off? And specifically, at another reading of it, it looks to me like the second part of the phrase after the et nachta, after the mibatechem, whoever eats this stuff is going to be cut off from Israel from the first day to the 7th day. So you could read it like you're just going to be out of the people from the first day to the 7th day, and then you can come back.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's right, but it seems the way it's looking to me. So I just wanted to ask you about that.
We touched on that last time, right? That you could read the flow of the verse to suggest that the nichrata, the cutting off, is only a week-long experience. Listen,
yeah.
Is it possible that that's the original pshat of the verse? It's not entirely impossible. It was never understood that way.
Really?
By the commentaries, either the Agadic or the Halacha commentaries. But yes, you can make an argument if you're going purely on the realm of biblical literalism. Could one make the argument that the implication of whatever nichrata means is that it would last as long as the holiday was lasting? I can't ensure that that's wrong, but it's not the way it was understood. And in terms of what karet means, let's wait till Rashi. The truth is that the Torah doesn't give us much context for it, right? So it ends up being a very significant, powerful punishment, Damocles sword hanging over someone who does any of the sins for which karet comes, but we don't have a clear sense in the Torah for what it means. All we know is that the word is from the root koret, kaf resh taf, which means to excise, to cut, right? Koret brit, to cut a covenant. In that sense, it doesn't mean to eliminate a covenant. It means to cut it and formalize it, right? It's an ending of something, or a completion of something.
Is that where
Kind of stuff.
karate comes?
It is what for karate comes from. Yes, yeah. Yes. Thank you, Joel. Alan, can someone bring Alan a microphone? The karate kid.
Oh my God. I've missed the puns.
All right, I got it written a little bit down, Sue.
I'll back up.
Okay.
I've always been troubled by
Yeah.
something that this is one case of many where it says Shivat Yamim Matzot Tochlu, that you're supposed to eat matzah for 7 days.
Mhm.
It says that over and over again in Shemot, but yet the halacha is that we're only obligated to eat matzah at the seders.
Right.
What is
Only Rashi, we're going to pay attention to that.
he's not going?
Let's read Rashi.
He is going to do.
He
it.
is, yes. Right. So
Oh.
remember, we are reading verses in their preserved amber state. And these are verses about which we have a very intimate relationship. We observe and choose. Like we observe the rules, or at least know them, whether or not we observe them, that emerge from these verses, but they emerge through a matrix, right? A midrashic matrix. And there's going to be a relationship between the ultimate practice and the verses, but it's not a one-to-one relationship. And so you're going to get Rashi is going to operate in this verse almost like a Rabbi Akiva. He's going to basically be quoting Midrash Halacha and walking us through how the rabbis got from A to Z, A to B. Okay. So, Alan, do you want to go to shot since you have a microphone on your hand?
No. All right. Let me get my glasses. Shivat Yamim. Oh my. Tiana Shel Yamim.
And the fact that there's a chupchik in the word that you pronounce as Shetiana, what does it tell you about what the status of that word is?
It's some sort of Mila Loazit, a
Right.
different word.
It's an old French, right? So let's look at Otsar Loaze Rashi. I'm going to put on the screen. Okay, so and the word Shivat, you see there, Shin Yud Yud Tet Yun Yud Nun Chupchik Aleph, which is his Hebrew spelling of a French word, a Seitenya, right? Which Otsar Loaze Rashi defines as Kfutza Shel Shiva, a set of 7, right? We don't necessarily have that word in English. A set of 2 is a
Pair,
or a set of 3 is a
trio,
set of 4 is a
quartet.
set of 5 is a, I guess you could say a septet, right? I don't think it's a word used so much, but it's a noun that is built on 7 of something, a group of 7, right? The question is, what's bothering Rashi? What is the question on the verse? To which the answer is, it means a setien. It's a 7-fold. It's a group of 7 of days. What's the problem in the verse that's the answer? Norm, you want to give it a shot?
Yes, without that, we might have the impression that 7 days means a week, and a week is generally from Sunday through Shabbos. And in fact, it's 7 days in a row, starting with whatever day Pesach happens to start.
That's a really interesting possibility. Rashi's answer, and that's an interesting possibility as to what the verse means. Rashi's issue is a little more particular, a little more persnickety than that. And let's go back. You want to go to Shacho with your hand up?
Yeah, why is there a taf instead of a hey?
Say it in the microphone.
Why is it Shivat instead of Shiva?
Right. Shivat Yamim, the T of Shivat, suggests that these 2 words are in what we call in Hebrew Smichut. Simcha, joy, Simchat Torah, the joy of Torah, right? And any number of other examples, right? So the simplest way to say 7 days is Shiva Yamim or Sheva Yamim, right? So Shivat Yamim suggests that the Shivat is a noun, and it's been put in Smichut. It's a something of days. Well, you can't even say in English. It's a 7 of days. You'd have to have the word septet, right? It's not a 2 of days. It's a pair of days. It's not a 3 of days. It's a trio of days. So Rashi says this does not mean 7. It means it's the Hebrew version of septet, which in French is apparently setenya. I don't know if that is what it is now, right? So that's really what he's troubled by. Why was there a tough there? suggesting that this is not the word seven, it's the noun that suggests a seven of something. Okay. Anything else on that verse? On that comment? All right, Alan, now starting to get into your question.
Okay. Shivat Yamim Matzot Tochlu, 7 days. Tochelu, you will eat matzot. Umakom acher hu omer sheshet yamim tochel matzot.
Okay, so Rashi is asking a slightly different question than you were asking, right? But he's going to get to your question. So I want to show this to you. Yeah. So not only is it the case, as Alan asked, that the Torah seems to obligate eating matzot for 7 days, but we know lahalacha, you're only obligated to eat matzot on the first day, right? You can go without consuming matzah all the rest of the Pesach according to halacha and be not in violation. But not only that, if you go to where the holidays are discussed in Parshat Re'eh, the holidays are discussed in different places, you don't even have the word seven. Look at this verse. Sheshet yamim tochal matzot. 6 days you should eat matzah.
No, a sextet of days.
A sextet, yes. Uvayom hashvi, on the 7th day, atzeret ladonai lohecha, it's some kind of a pausal day. Lo ta'asem lacha. So when Pesach is being discussed in Dvarim, it's still in its entirety a 7-day period. But the 7th day doesn't seem like what? A matzah day in Dvarim, right? If you were to read chapter 16, verse 8, plainly, you would understand almost that Pesach were parallel to Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, right? Shmini Atzeret is not the 8th day of Sukkot. It's a new thing, right? What is it? We don't know, but it's a new thing. If this was your only verse describing what Pesach is, you would think Pesach is a 6-day holiday on which you're obligated to eat matzot. And then on the 7th day, you've got Shvi'i Atzeret. We should basically call, according to Dvarim, the 7th day of Pesach, not Shvi'i Shel Pesach, but Shvi'i Atzeret, parallel to Shmini Atzeret, right? The Torah has internal inconsistencies. Sue, is your hand up? Mike.
The Sheshet Yamim, to me, it parallels the Yemei Maaseh. It's Sheshet Yamim, it's a kind of a creation thing you're going to do. You're going to do this for Sheshet Yamim, and on the 7th day is not it.
I mean, maybe when Dvarim is being produced either by God at Mount Sinai or in the 7th century BCE, there is some way in which the numerology of our tradition is playing out in this, and that this is evocative of Breshit, right? Breshit, creation of the world, Pesach, creation of the Jewish people. Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the month. If we're counting, Tishrei is the first month of the year for counting Rosh Hashanah. Nisan is the first month of the year for counting with the birth of the people. So perhaps, right, Stevie?
From a strictly historical perspective, probably the other way around, because that Shabbos is a sort of an invention of the P-text, and in Devarim only exists in the Ten Commandments at all. So it's more that Shabbos is playing with Pesach than the other way around. But
Possibly.
Beside the point.
Not entirely besides the point. So Rashi says, okay, so before we get to Alan's question, Rashi says, well, is it 7 or 6? How many days am I obligated to eat matzot? Go ahead.
Okay. Is it lemar?
Limed. It's taught.
Limed shel shvi'i shel pesach.
Al shvi'i.
Limed al shvi'i shel pesach she'eno chova le'echol matzah ubelvad shelo yochel chametz.
So it's saying that the verse from Deuteronomy, which I took off the screen, the one that says Sheshet Amim, seems to tell us what?
That it's not an obligation to eat matzah, but it's not. It says that you can't eat chametz. So
if we were to trust the book of Deuteronomy, we would say that you are not obligated to eat matzah after the 6 days, as long as you don't eat chametz on the 7th day. And so now, if we remember, Rashi doesn't think of Dvarim and the book of Shemot as at all in conflict. If anything, they're commenting on each other, right? But Micha Gubin makes this point 800 years after Rashi, that the first midrash on the Torah is the book of Dvarim, that Deuteronomy is a midrash on the Torah, right? It's coming to interpret, qualify, add to, refine the Torah. So Rashi is going to try to synthesize them, whereas a biblical scholar might say, "Oh, these are two different streams." Rashi says, "Well, how does the latter inform the former?" Matt,
just an interesting point that I heard this year. That
is that on? Is the light on? Okay, so just make it a little closer to your mouth.
Anyhow, someone told me that at the Chabad group that they go to in Camarillo or Camarillo, they make a point on the last day of Pesach. That's when they break down and eat egg matzah, and that's when they break down and eat matzah bread, which they don't for the other days.
Yeah, and Cantor Chorney gave a teaching on this over Pesach, that on her family, that's when they eat
ham and cheese.
kitniyot. Right? Same concept, that whatever the status is of Shvi Shel Pesach, it's different than the first days of Pesach, at least according to the book of Dvarim. Right? But Rashi is going to synthesize it differently. Hold on one second, Norman, Rachel. So keep going.
Minayin av sheshet reshut, shisha reshut. Talmud lomar sheshet yamim.
Shivat Yamim.
No, it says sheshet yamim here.
Okay, interesting. So your version of Rashi is quoting the verse from Dvarim in this part of the Rashi, as opposed to quoting the original verse. Interesting. What's the next word you have in the Rashi? Is it midaba Torah?
No, zu midaba Torah.
Okay. It's making the same point whether it's quoting the verse in Dvarim or the verse earlier. So just to follow the logic, we've got a verse in the book of Exodus that says 7 days eat matzot. We've got a verse in Deuteronomy that says that 6 days you eat matzah. And the problem, and as long as you don't eat chametz on the seventh day. Uminayin, and how do we know? Af hashisha reshut. How do we know then that not only are you not obligated to eat matzah on the seventh day, as you said, but the question is asked from the assumption that the rule is already known. Well, how do we know? It's sort of like, well, how do we get to the fact that we're actually only la halacha obligated to eat matzah on the first day? How do we know that all 6 days is only voluntary as opposed to obligatory? Talmud lomar, the verse teaches us, whether it's quoting here Shivat Yamim or Sheshet Yamim, it's interesting sub-argument as to which one it's when it's quoting. Zo midah.
This has zu midah.
Zu midah, either way.
All right. Zu midah b'Torah.
This is a midah b'Torah. Midah b'Torah is Rashi's way of referring to the technical category of a hermeneutical principle by which the Torah is interpreted. Those of you who come to Minyan on time, what's the thing that's said just before the Kaddish to Rabbanan?
The 13 principles.
The Braita of Rabbi Yishmael. So I'm going to put that on the screen. Okay, so this is just before the first Kaddish of the morning, that Rabbi Yishmael had 13 shlosh midot, same word, principles, by which the Torah is interpreted. This is not the only list of hermeneutical principles, but it's from the school of Rabbi Yishmael that there are 13 rules that help us understand the relationship between words in the Torah. Kal v'chomer, right? A fortiori argument, okay? Gzera shava, where a word appears here, a word appears there. It's seemingly random. If it's the same word, then you can make an association in rule between this section and that section, and lots of others. And we get to this one. All right. You really could spend 3 hours just on breaking this down. We're not going to. This is very complicated esoterica. Kol davar, anything, shehaya bichlal, that was initially mentioned in a general principle. V'yatsa min haklal, but then an exception came out, or it emerged from the general principle. Lilamed, to teach you something. Lo lilamed al atzmo yatsa. It didn't come just to teach you about the exception. Ella l'lamed al haklal kulo yatsa. Rather, it came to teach you on the very general principle that it began with, even though it doesn't look like it did. Rabbi Yishmael thought that's the way the Torah operates. And we'll read it inside the second, but you can imagine how he's going to be applied here. That if there's a rule saying you have to do this for 7 days, and then that's a klal, and then a specific rule after that says, well, you don't have to do it on this day. Rabbi Yishmael would say when it came to say you don't have to do it on this day, it actually also meant you don't have to do it on any of the days, even though the first thing the Torah said is that you have to do it those days. How Rabbi Yishmael got to that understanding of why Torah operates that way, we don't really know, or I don't really know. But it's considered a formalized principle of hermeneutics, and you need formalized principles of hermeneutics to have midrash that has internal logic, right? Internal to its own system. Barry, you need a microphone? Oh, wait, remember when it was very cold in this room? Yeah. It isn't anymore.
The rule of logic is once you have an exception to the general, it crumbles. The general crumbles.
Right. So you can make that argument. It doesn't look like that's what the verse should be saying, but Rabbi Yishmael says that's indeed what the verse should be saying. Rebecca, you say something?
Yeah. I was thinking that by the time we get to Deuteronomy and it says just 6 days, it was already the practice, not the Seder hadn't come along, but the eating of the sacrifice that had been done the day before. And so maybe along with that, there was eating of matzah. And that was, the start of it. And that was the big feast, was that first day. So by Deuteronomy, it's just talking about 6 more days. Should you eat matzah or not? Possible.
Remember that what you just said might be entirely accurate and totally anathema to Rashi. Rashi would never conceive of the notion about the time Deuteronomy came around, right? So he is forced to synthesize this as if both of these verses emerge simultaneously, mipi hagvura, from the mouth of the Holy One on Sinai. And therefore, if it says this, general principle, and then it says this, specific exception, then it must be, and they were both given at the same time, it must be the exception was meant to limit the general principle, according to this rule of interpretation. Okay, so now he spells it out. Keep going, Alan. Wait, you need a microphone. Davar Shaya. Basically, he's going to quote the Rabbi Yishmael.
Right. Midabar Torah, Davar Shahaya B'Yichlav.
The thing that was general.
Yatsa min haklal lelamed.
And it came out of the general principle to teach you something.
Mm-hmm. Lo lelamed al atzmo belvad yatsa.
It didn't come out just to teach about its own thing. Rashi here adds the word bilvad. Bilvad is not in the formal list of Rabbi Yishmael's principles. Ella
lelamed al haklal kulo yatsa.
Rather, it came out to teach you about the entire thing. And now he's going to apply that principle to our verses. We've already discussed it, but see how Rashi describes it. Ma
shvi'i reshut af.
If the 7th day is indeed voluntary, as we learn in Dvarim, because it says only eat at 6 days.
Yeah, af shisha reshut.
It must be that all of the first 6 days are also reshut. And what's the next question then an observant Jew has to ask? No, the 7th is reshut. What about the first?
Yeah.
Right? Because what we've done is saying you have to eat matzah 7 days. No, you only have to eat it 6 days because the 7th is voluntary. Well, if the 7th is voluntary, then all the 6 are voluntary. But we know that all 6 are not voluntary because on the first day, you have to eat matzah. That's how it emerged. And you can imagine the tug of war, the back and forth, what came first, the received rule or the games in the verse to figure it out. And so Rashi knows that we know that where this ended was that you do have to eat matzah on the first day. So how do we get there?
Yachol af halayla harishon reshut.
When you have the word yachol in a midrashic text, it means, so could it be possible then? And the answer to that is always no. Yachol is a supposition. It's going to be knocked down. Could it be then that even the first night is also voluntary? Talmud
Lomar be'erev tochlu matzot hakatuv Kav'o chova.
Okay, so there, what then 100% confirms that even though we went through the process of the exception in day 7 applying to all 6 days, that gets trumped by another obligation to actually eat it on the first day. Look ahead to verse 18 in our chapter. Verse 18 in chapter 12, Barishon on the first day, Ba'aba'a Asar on the 14th day, Lachodesh on the 14th day of the month, Be'erev Tochlu Matzot, that evening you must eat matzot, Ad Yom HaChad B'Shrim Lachodesh, until the 21st day of the month. Ignore the second half of that. Because Rashi says the fact that it comes to repeat that you eat it on the first day, according to Rabbi Ishmael, trumps the trump. We had a general principle, a limitation that applied to the entire general principle, and then we have yet another thing that says, yeah, but on the first day it's really obligatory. Almost clearly what happened is that over hundreds of years of development, right, hundreds of years, the rabbis were living in a time where what did the Jews do? They ate matzah on the first day as an obligation. And then they kind of back traced the rules using the principles that they had developed. And it sort of works. Yeah.
Mike.
Not Matt, not Mike, Matt.
The concept of the exception negating the general rule. Did I understand that correctly? So then why is it an exception?
Why is what? Why
if an exception it can be used to negate the general rule?
You got to ask Rabbi Ishmael.
Then why is it an exception?
That's how we understood the Torah to operate most of the time. That if you have a klal and then a prat, the prat looks like it's teaching about the prat, but it's actually teaching about the klal. It might be counterintuitive. It was not to him, right? And the truth is, if you do a close study of all of his 13 principles, it's hard stuff. It's very sophisticated stuff, but it's hard stuff, right? And there are 3 or 4 that have to do with klal and prat, and they're very complicated to understand, let alone explain. I'll just show them to you. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, just to show you kind of how layered this was. I don't know. Maybe Rabbi Shmuel was high. I have no idea, right?
Because we say the exception proves the rule. We say in English the exception proves the rule, and you're saying the exception disproves the rule.
Sort of, right? So there are several. So there's klal and then a prat. So a general principle followed by a specific one has certain meaning. Then miprat uchlal, you start with a specific rule and then a general one. Then you have klal ufrat uklal. Let's say you have a general principle, a specific law, and then a general principle. Iatadan elakena prat. All of that should be understood based on what's said about the prat, not the klal. Mm-hmm. Then you have miklal shut sarich prat. Let's say you have a general principle, but it actually requires a prat to understand it, and a prat shut sarich klal. You have a specific principle, and it requires a general principle, and then you have ours, right? So you could spend a semester trying to figure out, not forget about why he said what he said, but what it is even saying. Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva were the leaders of the two contemporaneous rival schools of thought about the interpretation of Torah, about the reality of God, about our obligation to mitzvot, right? And the most magisterial piece that's done about these camps was Heschel's Torah Min HaShamayim, the only book that Heschel wrote in Hebrew. Torah Min HaShamayim was a wonderful pun because he's playing with the idea that where does Torah come? It comes from heaven, right, from God. But Min HaShamayim, both in Hebrew and in English, as an idiom means it's gewaltic. It's amazing. It's Min HaShamayim. It's heavenly. Not that that's the source, but it's like this Shabbos was Min HaShamayim, and so that's Heschel's theology in one phrase, right? It's Torah that is sort of sourced up there, but it's also just amazing. And he's basically pitting the schools of Rabbi Shmuel against Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva had his own list, and it's not this list. Okay, I see a lot of hands up. The hand that was waiting the longest time was Norm and Rachel. So go ahead, Norm, Rachel.
I have two questions. The first one is, it seems like the rabbis are moving towards minimizing the need to eat matzah, and that might be related to wheat having been very expensive, which is a reason that the whole concept of raising men and help people observe Pesach is called Mos Chitim. And is that a reasonable understanding?
It could be, and it's a question of whether rabbis in Rabbi Ishmael's time are creating this practice or finding the Hansel and Gretel pathway back to the sources for a practice that's already prevalent. I don't know, right? I don't know enough about the economics of first century Palestine to know if wheat was such a rare commodity. I don't know. Maybe it was.
I certainly, from histories of Jewish food that I've read, there's suggestion that in those days the base was not grain but pulse, beans and barley less so.
I don't know if everyone heard it because that the fund that people contribute to, usually when they're selling chametz, it's called ma'ot chitin, money for wheat, right? Yeah. And you might think that in our day and age, like what's more cheap or fundamental than wheat? And most people on the planet can afford flour, right? But it may have been that it was more that you actually needed financial support to afford your wheat to eat your matzah. Possible. Interesting, Norm.
My other question is this related, this rule where on the last day of Pesach it's it's looser, is that at all related to the misguided approach of some of our brethren who do not eat gebruchts during most of Pesach but do on the last day?
Yeah, Matt offered that as a custom that's out there, and yes, it's possible that it's linked to this day. That whatever the status is, listen, whether you understand that Devarim is coming to comment on Shemot or Devarim and Shemot are given the same time, it seems to be that somewhere in the system, the status of chametz on the seventh day Pesach is at least slightly less stringent than on the other 6 days. Yeah, Stevie.
Yeah. I was just going to say that usually when we talk about Kol Efrat, it's sort of like a category and then an example. And in this case, like there's an extra logical jump about saying that like, oh, this verse was signaling out the seventh day as being optional when that's not what the verse, like, Pshat says, right? But the verse simply has a different number. And so there's like an extra logical jump that is not, so like this application of this rule feels more of a force than like, I think often it would feel like the natural way to read something, or at least a plausibly natural way to read something. Whereas,
I think you're right. I think it's a fair comment. Yeah. With any other hands up on this, Leonard?
It was mentioned the phrase, the exception proves the rule, but that doesn't mean what you think it does, because the word proof there actually means test. The exception tests the rule. It doesn't mean it confirms the rule. We've just changed the meaning of the word proof to confuse ourselves.
Wow.
Right, but it's the same thing if you say like the proof is in the pudding. What does that mean? It means the real test is how does it taste?
Well, that's an exception that proves the rule that most people don't understand idioms.
Well, they're totally idiomatic.
Right? Or that idea that, 73% of all statistics are inaccurate? Yeah, Barry.
So going back to a prat, there'll be two kinds of prat. One prat upholds, explains the kalal. So the kalal stands. Another prat crumbles. There's a chip in the structure of the kalal. The kalal falls.
The rabbis were definitely focused on the
I get it.
The relationship between general principles and specific ones. Okay, that's Rashi on Shivat Yamim, and now we go and where we've come to the end of it is his proving with no holes in his argument why it is the halacha the actual halachic obligation is to eat matzah on the first day of Pesach, but after that it is totally reshut, it's totally voluntary. Okay, but he continues with another comment. Ach b'yom harishon. Still Alan, if you're willing to. Let's get the microphone back.
Ach bayom harishon tishpetu she'ar seor.
Before you read,
Yeah.
what's the logical question on those words? We discussed it to be, so we want to bring it back up because Rashi's going to kind of assume we understand the logical question. The words mean on the 14th day, sorry, on the first day, you should get rid of the leaven from your house. What's the problem with that? It should be done already, right? Are you cleaning for Pesach on the first day of Pesach? But that's what the verse seems to say. On the first day, eradicate the leaven. Okay, so Rashi.
That's seor is
leavening agent.
The leavening agent. Okay.
Or sourdough, yeah.
Okay. Me'erev Yom Tov.
Okay, so the first thing he says is, don't worry, folks. Don't freak out. I know it looks like it says that you're doing this on the first day. What it means is sort of by the eve of the first day. Even though it doesn't say that, it means May Erev Yom Tov, by, from the evening of the first of Yom Tov.
V'karui rishon lefi shehu lifnei hashivah.
Okay, translate that.
Okay, that, and it is called the first day because it is before the seventh.
Right. That's a sentence that doesn't make sense in idiomatic English, right? You would say to Rashi, are you feeling okay? Like you've just contradicted yourself. And the reason why it's called the first is because it's taking place before the first, right? But he's got textual proof. So keep going. Umatzinu.
Umatzinu mukdam karui rishon.
Okay. I've got some places, he says, where the word rishon doesn't mean first, it means mukdam. What does mukdam mean?
Beforehand.
Before the verse. Kamo.
Kamo harishon adam tivaled.
Okay, look on the screen. This is a really interesting proof text to bring because either it's the case that the way Rashi is understanding this verse is the only way it was understood in his time, in which case it's a slam dunk proof text, or he's sort of intentionally bringing a verse where the word rishon can either mean what he says it's meaning as a proof text, or it actually means the thing he's trying to disabuse us of thinking. This is the book of Eob. This is a conversation. Eob, Job's friend Eliphaz, is surprised by Job's reluctance, his reluctance to listen to the arguments on the table. Why are you not listening to your friend? And it's basically saying, who do you think you are? But how does Job say, who do you think you are? Harishon Adam Tivaled, which Rashi wants us to understand means, were you born before Rishon, not first, but before the first man was born? If that's what this verse means clearly, then this is a good proof text. The only problem from my stand is that that's not what this verse means clearly. In fact, look at how it's translated. I think this is the JPS translation. Yeah. So the way JPS translates the verse undermines Rashi's proof text. It says, were you the firstborn man? Are you at Adam HaRishon? Which I think is a more logical way of understanding this verse. Who do you think you are, the first man? In which case Rishon does mean first. But Rashi seems to think it's sort of obvious that what this means is, were you born before any human being was born? And that's why you have the effrontery to reject these arguments. Sort of a weird proof text, if you ask me, unless the way JPS understands the verse is just radically different than how it was understood in France in the 11th century. Right? Okay, but one way or another, it's possible to read that verse as Rishon, meaning beforehand. Because look how he translates. He quotes, Kamo harishon Adam tibiled, and then Rashi, halifnei
Adam
noladata. So Rashi is certain that this verse means what?
That it was before the first, before you were born.
Ha is an interrogative. Was it lifnei Adam, before the first Adam noladata, that you were born? Are you pre-humanity?
Yeah.
Not the only way to read the verse. Okay. So where we are right now in the stream of logic is that you have to eliminate the Sa'or not on the first day, but before the first day, because sometimes Rishon means before. And then Rashi says, but maybe it doesn't mean that. Eino.
Eino elo Rishon shel Shiv'ah.
Or could it possibly be
that it is the first of the seven?
Or maybe the thing I just convinced you of is not what I should have convinced you of. Maybe Rishon means, I don't know, Rishon. Maybe the proof text I just brought to you in Job is not so strong. So maybe it does say that you have to actually eliminate the sore on the first day. Talmud Lomar, Midrashic thrust.
Talmud Lomar, Lo Tishchat al Chametz v'Gomel.
Okay, this is chapter 34, verse 25 of Shemot. So open it up. It's in Parshat Ki Tisa. You all have it. You all have the book of Exodus in front of you. What did I say? 34 what? 34, 25. Okay. Everyone got it? 34, 25.
Let's keep my spot here. Otherwise, I never find it.
This is from the reading of on Shabbat Chol Hamoed, Pesach, and Sukkot. Verse 24, going back a verse, Ki orish goyim mipanecha, I will I will separate the land from the other nations in your presence. V'hir chavti et gvulecha, I will expand your borders. Lo yachmod ish et artzacha, no other person will covet your land. Ba'alotcha, as you go up, le'ra'ot et pnei Adonai, to be seen by the face of God. Shalosh pa'amim b'shana, 3 days of the year. So this is the book of Dvarim, the book of Shemot's discussion of the 3 festival holidays. Lo tishchat al chametz dam zivchi. It's an interesting verse. You may not slaughter upon chametz, the blood of my offering. Velo yalin la boker, and don't let stay over until the morning. Zevach chag haPesach. What this verse means in context seems to be the Korban Pesach has to be consumed completely at night, and you can't make the slaughter take place with the presence of chametz. Here, chametz is interesting, is more having to do with like the status of a sacrifice than the Exodus story. And when we get into the book of Vayikra, folks, in 12 years, you'll see that the substance chametz is its presence and its absence is throughout the sacrificial system, having nothing to do with matzah or nothing to do with bread not rising. There's something about the substance itself that was integral to the sacrificial system. So here, this does not seem to be about Exodus night. It just seems to be that you can't slaughter the Korban Pesach when there's chametz around. So Rashi in our verse says, so what's the final word? Might I have thought that the Rishon in our verse means that you don't have to get rid of the chametz until the first day? No way, because we have chapter 34, verse 25 that says when you're offering the Korban Pesach, we all know the Korban Pesach is slaughtered on the 14th day. There can't be any chametz around. So Rashi says, Lo tishchat.
Lo tishchat haPesach v'adayin chametz kayam. That you cannot tishachet, slaughter the Korban, the Pesach, and still have any chametz around it.
Right. So lest you thought that it's possible that the word Rishon in this verse actually means Rishon, lest you thought that it means that you could do the eradication of the leaven on the first day of Pesach. No, we have a proof text from somewhere else that says when you are preparing for Pesach to the Korban Pesach, the chametz has to be completely gone. We knew all this, but Rashi is trying to make sense of the verses, and he's trying to link practice to core texts, which is, this is where it began. Chapter 12 of the book of Shemot is where the Jewish observance of Pesach began, and he's trying to kind of synthesize like 2,000 years of intellectual history. It's a long time, right? I mean, we sometimes we think of, we think about the relationship between Rashi and Maimonides and Shulchan Aruch, like hundreds of years passed between these. We've been alive a couple of decades. That's an enormous amount of time of a development of an idea of practice. And then to back trace it was complicated. Okay, good. Ashkoach, Alan. Anything else that we've already read? Okay. Rashi continues. He has two more comments on this verse. Alan, let's hand you off. Let's hear from someone we haven't heard from today. Renee, do you want to read the next Rashi, which is Hanefesh Hahi? Now we're going to get into the punishment part of the verse of this notion of karet.
Nefesh. The nefesh ahi, yeshehi benafsha ubeda'ata. Prati la'anus. Prat la'anus.
Prat la'anus. Okay, so the verse says that any nefesh who eats chametz will be cut off. And Rashi is asking, why is the word nefesh used? Now remember, Rashi's relationship with the word nefesh is going to be different than our relationship with the word nefesh. We think of nefesh as something being in the spiritual realm, right? Nefesh, biblically and according to Rashi, has to do with more tangible and material, your actual presence, right? Your actual body, your actual identity. So Rashi says, since the verse says a nefesh ahi, when does this punishment apply? Only kshehi benafsha uveda'ata. What does that mean?
It's intentional state of consciousness or not.
Right. Only when you are in your nefesh, when you are present in your body, uveda'ata, and in your mind. Prat, which excludes anus. What does anus mean?
Sin.
Forced, right? In Hebrew, ones is rape. Same root, right? Forced into doing something that you very much do not want to do, which means halachically speaking, if indeed whatever karet means, and we'll get into that, if it is the punishment for consuming chametz on Pesach, it's only the punishment for consuming chametz on Pesach if
you're forced to.
No, not if you're forced to. If you knew you were not supposed to do it, you were not anyway. You were not out of your mind. You were in your nefesh, in your dot, and you still did it. Karet, right? And this is a way of saying this is a very serious punishment. It only comes to you if you willfully, wantonly, right? That's the word that's all over our machzor. You wantonly did it, then karet may come to you. If you accidentally did it, it's a different thing. Or you were confused for a second, different thing. Only if you were a full nefesh.
So not only by force, but also those out of their mind at that time,
which is in the category of anus halachically, right? Not force in the sense that you did not choose this willfully.
Could be deranged.
Yeah. Okay, so that's hanefesh ahi, and then let's see if we have time for the last comment. Me Yisrael, Renee. You muted yourself.
תיקראת מישראל, ותלך לה...
Go back 2 words. שומע אני.
שומע אני, תיקראת מישראל, ותלך לה לעם אחר.
Put a question mark there. Shomea ani is another word like yachol. Remember, I said yachol means could it be that? And the answer to that is always no. Shomea ani is, am I hearing correctly from this verse that it means this? And that's always rejected. No, you're not hearing correctly. So Rashi saying, am I hearing from this verse, tikaret mi Yisrael, that you'll be cut off from Israel, from the Jewish people. V'telech la'am acher, and I can just breezily go to another nation and live out my life there? Talmud Lomar,
Talmud
the verse
Lomar.
comes to teach us.
במקום אחר מלפניי.
Milfanai. Okay, so I want to share that verse. This is Vayikra chapter 22, verse 3. I have it teed up. Where am I here? Vayikra. Okay. So, as I said, the holidays are discussed in several different places. This is from Parshat Emor. This is read on the first day of Pesach. And we have the verse, Vayidaber Moshe Lemor, God says to Moses, saying, Daber el Aaron vel banav, speak to Aaron and his children, Vinazru mikodshei v'nei Israel, they need to be nizirim, very careful, almost ascetic, when dealing with the holy objects of the children of Israel. V'lo yichalalu, V'lo yichalu et shem kodshi, they shall not profane my holy name. Asher heim makdishim li, that they are trying to make holy for me because I'm God. In fact, verse 3, Amor lehem, tell these priests in training, ledorotechem, forever and ever. Kol ish asher yikrav mikol zarachem, any person who brings a sacrifice from all of your descendants, el hakodashim, towards the holiest place, Asher Yagdishu v'nei Israel Adonai, that God is trying, that the Israelites are trying to sanctify to God. V'tumato alav, his impurity is upon him. V'nichrata, same verse as our verse, it will be cut off. Who will be cut off? Hanefesh ahi, that soul, milfanai, from my presence. In our verse in the book of Exodus, it says mi Yisrael, cut off from Israel. But in Leviticus, it associates the notion of being cut off as being cut off from God, which is more comprehensive, more severe, right? So Rashi says Leviticus modifies Exodus. And since in Leviticus it says he'll be cut off milfanai, from my presence, Rashi concludes, B'chol
makom shehu rashuti. Every place that's under my mission, dominion.
My reshut, my authority, my dominion, right? Which is where? Everywhere. There's no escape from karet, right? This does not answer what karet is. We can start class next week by trying to explain that. The Torah doesn't explain karet. Rashi is not trying to explain karet because he knows what it means. He's just trying to explain how the verses suggest that whatever it means, even though it looks like it means in this verse, it's just kind of a separation from Jewish peoplehood. No, it's bigger than that. Milfanai, it's a separation from God's very presence, which led to interesting theories as to what the Torah intended by karet, and maybe we'll start with that next week. There's one hand up I want to make sure we get to. Larry, Diane, you'll have the final word.
I just wanted to comment, and Joel can probably say more if he wanted to, that this whole idea about intention in committing either a mitzvah or an averah is something that's covered a lot in the Talmud. Joel and I and Marshall have just been studying in Kiddushim the question about intent. And I don't know if I'm right, but if during Pesach you have the intent to eat bread, if you have the desire, the wish to eat bread, and you said, I really, 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 really want to eat bread, that would not be an averah by itself, unless there's something that prevented you from acting on your intention, and that was the only reason you didn't do it. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting relationship between intention and action when it comes to prayer in the positive sense, and when it comes to sinfulness, right? In general, Judaism does not criminalize thought. But the Zemer on Friday nights, Litaneg b'tahanugim barburim. One of the verses, hirhurim mutarim. What is a hirhur? It's a thought. You're allowed to think on Shabbat about things you shouldn't do on Shabbat. You just can't do them, right? It's actually our traditional way of understanding that it's hard enough to criminalize, to restrain your action, but thinking about doing something wrong, right? Can you imagine a world in which fantasy were prohibited, like a minority, like you could know someone's thoughts and punish them based on that. Our tradition, well before science fiction came into mind, was basically saying, no, thoughts are permitted. It's acting on them. But yes, there's that little ending to it, unless the only reason why you're not acting on your thought is because of some kind of external blockage. And had you been given the chance to, you would have. That gets closer to something actually sinful. Yeah. All right, we'll pick up with Karet next week. Shkoyach, everybody. Have a good day.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, go to www.tbala.org.